With Starfield's release just around the corner, I thought it would be interesting to look back on the history of Bethesda Games. Bethesda's gaming history has been somewhat mixed, with some seeing the company's games as some of the best role-playing games out there, whereas others seem to think that Bethesda are one of the most overrated video game companies. I think if we can all agree on one thing, it's that Bethesda is a very successful company who have produced some of the most recognised games in gaming history. In the video, we will not be focusing on every game made by Bethesda. Instead, we will be focusing on the ones that had a huge impact on the company, whether that be for good or bad. Bethesda Softworks was founded on June 28, 1986 by Christopher Weaver, a software developer and entrepreneur, who founded the company due to his work on a football game. Initially, this idea was brought to him by one of his engineers who worked at his company, Video Magic Laboratories. Weaver built upon these initial ideas, creating a more realistic gameplay by incorporating physics. In 1986, the game was released and was titled Gridiron. Gridiron was released on the Amiga, Atari ST and the Commodore 64 system. The game was distributed in plastic bags to a few hundred people. This was seen as a massive surprise for Weaver, who saw this as a huge success for the company. The game was loved by fans and critics alike. Games International magazine gave the game an 8 out of 10, highlighting the combination of both strategy and action. Gridiron was a huge success for the company, going on to win Sports Game of the Year, as well as being voted as one of the 40 best games of all time by Amiga World. Christopher Weaver said it best when he stated that Gridiron put Bethesda on the map. It would be a couple of years before Bethesda would release their next game. In 1988, Bethesda Softworks released their second sports game, Wayne Gretzky Hockey. The game was a critical success, with Computer Gaming World claiming that it was an unhesitating recommendation to anyone who enjoys hockey. Computer World Gaming also declared that Wayne Gretzky Hockey was the 11th best computer game ever produced. It seems that fans agreed, as the game was also a commercial success, with sales reaching 350,000 units by 1995. Interestingly, to anyone who follows Bethesda today, it was Wayne Gretzky Hockey that inspired future Bethesda director Todd Howard to become obsessed with joining Bethesda Softworks. This is an important event to note, as Howard's influence on Bethesda would help shape them into the company they are today. Howard's journey to working at Bethesda was not easy. In fact, he was rejected a number of times. It wouldn't be until 1994 that Bethesda would finally say yes to offering him a job. Wayne Gretzky Hockey was a huge turning point for Bethesda. I think Gridiron got the ball rolling for Bethesda, but it was Wayne Gretzky Hockey that pushed Bethesda forward into a recognised gaming company. After a couple of sequels to the much beloved Wayne Gretzky Hockey game, in 1991 Bethesda would take the company in a new direction with the release of the Terminator. As you can tell by the name, this game was based on the popular movie franchise and would be released as Terminator 2 released in cinemas. The Terminator was an action-adventure game set in 1984. Players would take on the role of either Kyle Reese or the Terminator. If the players chose Reese, it would be their job to protect Sarah Connor from the Terminator. If players chose the Terminator, it would be their job to hunt down Reese and Connor. No matter who the player chose, the gameplay is the same. It tasks the player with hunting down their opposition through Los Angeles, with the player having to steal or buy weapons along the way in order to help them with their objective. The Terminator was praised for giving the player the ability to play as either Reese or the Terminator, as well as a 3D rendered recreation of Los Angeles. However, there were some criticisms, especially towards the controls, that were seen as quite complex. This was made worse due to the manual being less than helpful. Despite this setback, the Terminator performed very well, with it topping the charts upon its release, and marked another step forward for Bethesda, seeing them move away from sports and towards action-adventure titles. It would be 1994 that Bethesda would release their next big title, one that would begin one of the longest-running gaming series, which is widely recognised by many gamers today. This game would be Elder Scrolls Arena. Development of the game was spearheaded by Ted Peterson, Vijay Laksham and Julian Lefay, who were huge fans of pencil and paper role-playing games. It was their passion that really helped shape Arena's development. However, there were many who believed Bethesda were incapable of making such a game. Ted Peterson has mentioned how at the time They were laughed at by other companies for even suggesting that they wanted to make a game like Arena. Initially, the game was not going to be an RPG at all, with it instead, as the title suggests, going to be an arena game, in which the player and the team would travel around a world fighting the other teams in an attempt to become the Grand Champion. However, as the game was developed, the team began adding more and more RPG elements. Eventually, at some point during its development, Bethesda decided to make the game a dedicated RPG. Elder Scrolls Arena is a first-person action-adventure role-playing game, in which the player is tasked with uncovering a conspiracy against the Emperor Uriel Septim VII. The game takes place in Tamriel, a continent I'm sure any Bethesda fan is familiar with by now. There are different settings in the game, due to the player being able to explore the entire continent of Tamriel, including the wilderness, towns, and dungeons, which players can explore while playing the game. As well as the game having a main quest, players are also able to play through a number of side quests, which can be started by talking to NPCs in the village. Interestingly, the game is infinite. This means that fast travel is a must for anyone who played the game, as otherwise the player would just keep going forever. Initially, the game did not sell well. This was mainly due to the title of the game, with many people believing it was an arena game. Early sales only reached 3,000. This concerned many at Bethesda, who were worried that the company would end up going out of business. However, it would be word of mouth that would save the company. With word spreading that Arena was a must-play, sales of the game skyrocketed. However, it is unknown how many copies were sold. Elder Scrolls Arena was a critical success too, with the game being praised for its rich and compelling open world, graphics, and its overall gameplay. The game would eventually go on to win Role-Playing Game of the Year, but more importantly, Elder Scrolls Arena was so impactful that it set a new standard for role-playing games and would mark the beginning in Bethesda's journey of creating one of the most successful gaming series known today. Over the next few years, Bethesda would make some less memorable games, including PGA Bowling. However, Bethesda would release their next big title, Elder Scrolls Daggerfall. Daggerfall was an open-world action-adventure role-playing game. The story follows the player, who is sent by the Emperor to free the ghost of King Lysanders from his earthly shackles and discover what happened to a letter sent from the Emperor to the former Queen of Daggerfall. Development for the game began immediately after the release of Arena in 1994. Ted Peterson was once again assigned to the role of lead game designer. Julian LeFay claimed that they wanted Daggerfall to be a true pen and paper role-playing game, in which the player could continue playing the games for years. Unlike Arena, the player was not able to travel across the entire continent of Tamriel. Instead, they were only able to explore 2 provinces, with these being High Rock and Hammerfell, but this was more than made up for in the detail put into both, with the provinces having 15,000 cities, towns and villages, as well as dungeons for players to explore. One really interesting gameplay mechanic in Daggerfall was that players had the ability to create their own spells. This is unlocked by joining the Mages Guild, one of many guilds located throughout the game. Daggerfall was a critical success, surpassing Arena in the number of Game of Year awards it won. The game was praised for its overall gameplay, with many reviewers referring to it as revolutionary. This is mainly due to the number of things you were able to do within the game, making it a game with endless possibilities, as one reviewer put it. However, there were some issues with Daggerfall. Upon its release, the game contained a number of bugs. There were so many in fact that PC Magazine stated that their staff were shocked at the number of bugs present in the game. However, despite these criticisms, Daggerfall would be quoted as being a masterpiece only held back by the bugs. PC Game UK would place the game at number 33 in the best games of all time. Fans seem to agree with the assessments of the reviewers, as Elder Scrolls Daggerfall was a commercial success, with sales of the game surpassing Bethesda's estimates. More than 100,000 copies were sold within the first 2 days of its release, resulting in supplies of the game being depleted almost immediately. As a result, Daggerfall became an immediate hit, with Bethesda shipping 700,000 copies by 2000, making the game Bethesda's largest success, both financially and critically at the time. Despite the successes, Bethesda's next two games would end up being commercial and critical failures. Both games would also be Elder Scrolls games. This would mark a time in Bethesda's history where the company faced financial struggles. These games were titled An Elder Scrolls Legend Battlespire and An Elder Scrolls Adventure Redguard. The games were released in 1997 and 1998 respectively. Battlespire was originally meant to be an expansion to Daggerfall, but it was decided during its development that the game would instead be a standalone game, hence the title An Elder Scrolls Legend. Battlespire saw the player take on the role of an apprentice, who on the day of their final test discovers that an army of Daedra has invaded and killed nearly everyone. The game felt like a watered down version of Daggerfall, with many of the features not present within Battlespire. Some examples included the game having no merchants, no rest features, and the enemies not resetting when the player left an area. The game did feature a multiplayer mechanic, which was a first for the Elder Scrolls series. However, it did not seem to help make the game a commercial hit. Critically, the game did not do well either. PC Gamer UK gave the game 49%, and PC Gamer US gave Battlespire a 58% score. Moving on to the second game, An Elder Scrolls Adventure Redguard was in development for 2.5 years and was inspired by games such as Tomb Raider and Prince of Persia. Bethesda wanted to create a number of games that would simply be action-adventure games. However, this would change following the release of this game. Redguard was the only Elder Scrolls game that forced the player to play in third person, as well as having a predetermined character. The story takes place between the events of Arena and the Elder Scrolls Online. It follows the character of Cyrus, a young Redguard who is searching for his sister, who finds himself in the middle of a political intrigue. Critically, the game did better than Battlespire, with Redguard even being nominated for Game of the Year. However, it is clear to see that fans did not feel the same way. It was the first Elder Scrolls game to be directed by Todd Howard, who has stated since that Redguard contributed to the downward spiral of Bethesda's financial situation. This was the first time Bethesda had two big games fail financially. From my point of view, it marks a huge point in Bethesda's history. It would be some years before Bethesda would have another huge hit on their hands. This was in part due to their financial situation. However, this would change in 2002, when Bethesda released The Elder Scrolls III: Morrowind. Development of the game began in 1998, but even before then Bethesda were already looking at a third Elder Scrolls game during the development of Daggerfall. However, the game was put on hold in 1997 as the team did not feel as if they were ready for it. This was due to the technology present at the time. However, after the failures of both Battlespire and Redguard, The Elder Scrolls III became Bethesda's main focus. Bethesda wanted to use Morrowind to revitalise the company and grow itself into the company it used to be, with them hoping to return to the forefront of the gaming industry. Morrowind would be spearheaded by the project leader Todd Howard, who had learnt a lot from his experience directing Redguard. The team wanted the game to allow the player to explore as they wished. Therefore, from the beginning of the game, players have the freedom to complete tasks in whatever way they see fit. Morrowind's main story takes place in Vvardenfell, an island in the Duma province of Morrowind, which is a part of the continent of Tamriel. The main focus is on the demigod Dagoth-Ur, who seeks to gain power and break Morrowind free from Imperial rule. The game contains a highly detailed geographical climate, which received much praise from numerous critics. The game was a critical success, with the game being praised for its visuals, the overall scope of the game and the soundtrack, which was composed by Jeremy Soule. Morrowind won Game of the Year awards including IGN's RPG of the Year, IGN's Best Story, GameSpot PC's best Xbox RPG, just to name a few. However, there were some criticisms. Perhaps the biggest was directed towards the journal system. Within Morrowind, the player has a journal which is automatically updated with information from time to time following conversations and during important events. However, the journal was found to be a complete mess, with it being hundreds of pages long. Bethesda did do their best to fix this issue, but it is a point that both fans and critics can both agree on. The game was also a commercial success, with Morrowind reaching 95,000 units by June 2002. This rose to 200,000 by September, and by 2005, sales had surpassed 4 million copies. It was the best-selling RPG for Xbox, and one of the best-selling games on Xbox until 2003. Morrowind was a return to form for Bethesda, which launched them back into the forefront of the gaming industry. Following the success of Morrowind, many of the games published by Bethesda were developed by other companies. A great example of this are games such as the Pirates of the Caribbean. It would be some time before Bethesda developed a game themselves, but in 2007, Bethesda would release their next big title, The Elder Scrolls Oblivion.
This is the 27th of Last Seed, the year of Akatosh 433. These are the closing days of the Third Era, and the final hours of my life.
Development of the game began in 2002, directly after Morrowind was released. Ken Rolston would be in charge of the game's development, who is the lead designer on Morrowind. The team decided that they wanted Oblivion to have a more realistic storyline, with better quest structure and stronger characters. Technology had advanced enough that the AI was improved dramatically, due to complaints that Morrowind's NPCs were too simplistic. As a result, NPCs were designed to make choices. They would also eat, sleep, read, and speak to each other. The AI was so advanced at the time that if NPCs had a goal to eat food and they couldn't find any, they would resort to stealing it from others. As a result, Bethesda had created an AI that could engage in complex activities. Oblivion also included a number of well-known actors, including Patrick Stewart, Linda Carter, and Sean Bean. However, due to the game featuring fully voiced actors for the first time, this led to some difficulties with the dialogue. One such issue arose from the change in NPC behaviour when talking to the player.
In for enough to feed me kids. Thank you, kind sir.
Everyone's saying there's trouble in Kvatch.
Trespassing is against the law! Guards! Goodbye.
Stop! You violated the law. Pay the court a fine or serve your sentence. Your stolen goods are now forfeit.
The score to Oblivion was once again composed by Jeremy Soule. Soule's desire was to create a soundtrack that he wanted to be soft and minimalistic. Bethesda also took advantage of the upgrades in technology to greatly improve the graphics that included HDR and specular mapping. To help with the development of the terrain, developers worked with travel photos, nature books, reference photographs, and texture images. This helped Bethesda create graphically superior surroundings compared to previous games. Oblivion was a critical success, with it receiving universal acclaim. The game was praised for its graphics, game world, as well as the overall improvements with NPCs and gameplay. Oblivion also won a number of awards, including over 10 Game of the Year awards. Jeremy Soule also won an award at the MTV Video Awards for the Best Original Score, and Patrick Stewart won an award for his voice work in the game. Oblivion was also a commercial success. Even before its release, it received huge amounts of attention, with the game receiving high anticipation, even being described as the first next-generation game. By April 10, 2006, the game had shipped 1.7 million copies. By January 2007, this had increased to 3 million. It is estimated that current sales of the game have reached as high as 9.7 million copies. Oblivion helped Bethesda continue on its upward trajectory, and put Bethesda in the discussion for possibly the best RPG developer in the world. Throughout the next couple of years, Bethesda began working on their next big title, one that many today probably know quite well, Fallout 3.
Our American way of life. Isn't it grand? Peace, freedom, and bacon and eggs. Seems perfect. But what if it's not? Friends, your future may not be as secure as you think. Where will you be when the atomic bombs fall? You can secure your family's future by reserving a spot in a state-of-the-art underground vault from Vault-Tec. That's right, Bob. Act now, and your family can wait out the horrors of nuclear devastation. And Doris, the vault will have all the amenities of your modern-day home, and it's attractive. And Sally, in the vault, you might meet that special someone, just as you would on the surface. And in a few short years, you and your fellow vault dwellers will repopulate our great country. And Billy, you'll have lots of swell kids to play with. Reserve your family spot in a state-of-the-art underground vault today. Sign up now and prepare for the future.
Bethesda began working on the game in 2004, but Bethesda did not commit too much time to it until the release of Oblivion. The game would be directed by Todd Howard, who had previously directed the much-loved Morrowind. Bethesda wanted Fallout 3 to be similar to the first two games, focusing on non-linear gameplay, a compelling story, and black comedy. Originally, Bethesda were given permission by Interplay Interactive to create a series of Fallout games, but this changed in 2007, when the company went bankrupt. Bethesda ended up buying the full rights to Fallout. This gave them more control over the game. Despite Bethesda wanting Fallout 3 to be similar to previous Fallout titles, they wanted to move away from the series' 2D isometric graphics and turn-based combat, and move towards 3D graphics and real-time combat. The game went through many changes over its development. Todd Howard revealed that at first, the team wanted to recreate the entirety of Washington DC. However, this became too complicated and would result in a much longer development time. The game's story had progressed to a point where upon its release there were 12 versions to the final cutscene that would change depending on the choices the player had made throughout the game. The score was composed by Ian Zur, who had worked on a number of games including Crusader Kings and Crysis. Despite Zur composing the score, he refutes the idea that he is the sole person responsible for the music in Fallout 3. He has also cited that Todd Howard and Mark Lambert, the sound designer for the game, helped him in the game sound implementation. According to Zur, he only made 50% of it. Bethesda also hired a number of actors to play roles in the game, including Liam Neeson and Ron Perlman. Fallout 3 is set in a post-apocalyptic ruins of Washington DC, which in the game is referred to as the Capital Wasteland. The main story takes place in the year 2277, 200 years after the bombs had dropped. Players take control of an inhabitant of Vault 101. The player is forced to leave the vault and enter the wasteland in search for their father, who disappeared under mysterious circumstances. As the player progresses, they set out to complete their father's work while fighting against the Enclave, the now corrupted remains of the former US government. Upon its release, Fallout 3 received universal acclaim, with the game being praised for its open-ended gameplay, sound design, soundtrack, the art direction, and the engaging story. However, there were some criticisms directed towards the story, with much of it to do with the ending. It is an issue that still divides fans to this day. Fallout 3 won a multitude of awards, including Game Developers' Choice Awards for Game of the Year and Best Writing, IGN's Game of the Year, and Ultimate Game of the Year, to name but a few. Fallout 3 is considered one of the best video games of all time, with the game being rated at number 7 on IGN's Game of the 2000 to 2009 decade, as well as IGN putting the game as number 10 in their top 100 RPGs of all time, noting that Fallout 3 is the epitome of the deep modern RPG, and that many developers will mimic the game moving forwards. Fallout 3 was also a commercial success, when in its first week, it beat all the previous Fallout games' sales combined. By November 2008, sales had reached 4.7 million, giving Bethesda a gross profit of 300 million. In 2015, it was estimated that the game had sold 12.4 million copies worldwide. Fallout 3 proved to many that Bethesda were capable of creating an RPG that wasn't based on the Elder Scrolls series. It proved to the gaming community that they were still at the forefront of the gaming industry, and helped launch a new popular series for Bethesda that would remain as popular today.
War. War never changes.
As previously stated, it was in the 2000s that Bethesda began publishing games developed by other companies, many of which sold very well. However, there is one game that is often discussed when Bethesda is brought up. This is because the game this company made is often considered the best Fallout game of all time. This is of course Fallout New Vegas.
Time to cash out.
Will you get it over with?
Maybe cons kill people without looking them in the face. But I ain't a fink. Dig? You've made your last delivery, kid. Sorry you got twisted up in this scene. From where you're kneeling must seem like an 18-carat run of bad luck. Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
Originally, Bethesda were going to work on the next Fallout game themselves, but with the company focused on the next Elder Scrolls game, they instead reached out to Obsidian Entertainment, a company that were founded by several Interplay members, all of whom had worked on the original Fallout. Originally, Obsidian wanted the game to take place between the events of Fallout 2 and 3, however this was rejected by Bethesda. Obsidian decided to go with a setting in Las Vegas instead. The game was directed by Jack Sawyers. The development of the game was very short compared to other Bethesda titles, with Obsidian only being given 18 months to develop it. The team built upon the Fallout 3 model, with them upgrading the graphics, as well as the team adding better shooting mechanics, giving the player the ability to aim down the sight. Obsidian also brought in a karma system, something that was not present within Fallout 3. The karma system would track the good and bad things players did. This would change the standing players would have in a particular faction or settlement, helping add depth to the role-playing elements of the game. A number of voice actors were hired for roles including Ron Perlman and Matthew Perry. New Vegas contained around 65,000 lines of dialogue, beating Bethesda's Fallout 3, which held the record with 40,000 lines of dialogue. Iron Zur returned to compose the score, with the game featuring more radio channels than previous games. Obsidian also decided to include music by composer Mark Morgan, who had made music for the first 2 Fallout games. The game is set in a post-apocalyptic open-world region consisting of Arizona, California and Nevada. The game takes place in 2281, 4 years after the events of Fallout 3, and 204 years after the bombs were dropped. The players take control of the Courier, who while transporting a package across the Mojave Desert was ambushed, robbed, shot and buried in a cemetery. The Courier is eventually dug out and with the help of a doctor recovers from their wounds. The courier then begins their journey to find their killer and recover the package. While this happens, they become caught up in a conflict that will determine who controls New Vegas and the Mojave Wasteland. Fallout New Vegas is an interesting one when it comes to its critical reception. Upon its initial release, it received generally positive reviews, with the game being praised for improved gameplay, but criticising it for its technical issues. By November the 8th, 2010, the game had shipped 5 million copies worldwide. It is estimated that the sales of the game have reached, if not surpassed, 11.6 million copies. The game was also praised for its script. What held the reviewers back were the massive amounts of bugs present in the game, although this is understandable given the short window Obsidian had to make the game in the first place. It would be a year later, however, after a number of patches, that Fallout New Vegas became critically acclaimed, with praise given to the story, the role-playing elements and music. IGN have also rated it as the 28th best RPG of all time, beating all other Fallout games made by Bethesda, and is often considered the best Fallout game ever made. Fallout New Vegas is one of Bethesda's biggest successes, but one that has to be credited to Obsidian Entertainment.
War. War never changes.
Giving Obsidian the chance to work on the next Fallout game, Bethesda were able to give their full attention to their next Elder Scrolls game. It is often considered Bethesda's most successful game of all time, winning 227 awards. In 2011, Bethesda released The Elder Scrolls Skyrim. Development of the game began in 2006. The team's main focus was Fallout 3, but they already began planning for the next Elder Scrolls game. From the beginning, the team wanted the game to be set in Skyrim, with them wanting to incorporate dragons. Development began properly in 2008, once Fallout 3 was released. The game was directed by Todd Howard, who at this point had directed a number of Bethesda games. The team was made up of roughly 100 people, with the team having both veteran members of Bethesda and a number of new developers. Art director Matt Carafano wanted to try and encapsulate the wonder of discovery that had been previously seen in Morrowind. The team wanted to create a world with a unique culture. To make each town different from one another, the team was split into 9 different sectors. This was done to make each town feel unique from one another. Some made the towns rich and elaborate, whereas others were poorer. The choice to have mountainous terrain was done on purpose, as it made the game more difficult to traverse and helped create the idea of adventure and discovery. NPCs were also developed using the Radiant AI artificial intelligence that was first created for Oblivion. Within the game, NPCs are able to have greater interactions with other NPCs and their environment, and are even able to complete a number of tasks, such as farming and mining. Jeremy Saul was brought back to compose the game. Perhaps the most recognised song is Dragonborn, that Todd Howard wanted to sound like a song sung by barbarians. Saul began working on it straight away. This was recorded by a choir of 30 people who sang in a completely fictional dragon language. Soul then layered 3 separate recordings, making it sound as if there were a lot more singing the song. Bethesda also hired a number of voice actors, including Christopher Plummer and Joan Allen. Altogether, Bethesda hired 70 voice actors and recorded around 60,000 lines of dialogue. Skyrim is set 200 years after the events of Oblivion and takes place in the northernmost region of Tamriel. The main story focuses on the Dragonborn, who is given the quest to defeat Alduin, a dragon who is prophesied to destroy the world, all while a civil war is raging throughout the province. Over the course of the game, players will complete a number of side quests that will develop their character skills. Upon its release, Skyrim received critical acclaim, with the game being praised for its world design, a better character advancement system, the art style which drew acclaim from many reviewers, as well as the overall depth. The game is considered to be one of the best games ever made, winning 227 awards and being re-released on 3 generations of consoles. The game was also a commercial success. Within the first 2 days, 3.4 million units were sold. By the time the week had ended, this number had reached 7 million units. By 2011, sales had risen to 10 million copies, and as of 2023, it is estimated that over 60 million copies of the game have been sold worldwide. Skyrim's influence on the gaming world cannot be ignored. Developers have often credited Skyrim as influencing later games such as Breath of the Wild and The Witcher, as well as popularising large-scale open-world games. Even though Skyrim was originally released more than 10 years ago, it is believed that millions are still playing the game.
Sons of Skyrim would spill their own blood, but no one wanted to believe they even existed. And when the truth finally dawned, it dawns in fire. But there's one they fear. In their tongue, he is Dovahkiin, Dragonborn.
Over the next few years, Bethesda stuck to publishing games developed by other companies, with some examples including The Evil Within and The Elder Scrolls Online. This was because they were busy working on their next big title, one that would become one of the most anticipated games of all time, Fallout 4.
War. War never changes. In the year 1945, my great-great-grandfather, serving in the army, wondered when he'd get to go home to his wife and the son he'd never seen. He got his wish when the US ended World War II by dropping atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The world awaited Armageddon. Instead, something miraculous happened. We began to use atomic energy not as a weapon, but as a nearly limitless source of power. People enjoyed luxuries once thought the realm of science fiction. Domestic robots, fusion-powered cars, portable computers. But then, in the 21st century, people awoke from the American dream. Years of consumption led to shortages of every major resource. The entire world unraveled. Peace became a distant memory. It is now the year 2077. We stand on the brink of total war. And I am afraid. For myself. For my wife. For my infant son. Because if my time in the army taught me one thing, it's that war never changes.
Initial plans for the game began in 2009, when Todd Howard wanted to explore the world of Fallout before the bombs dropped. Production began in that same year, but the team was still fully committed to Skyrim and the DLCs that would be developed after its release. In 2013, Fallout 4 began full production. Todd Howard once again returned as the game's director and producer. The team wanted to allow the player to create a character that would be shaped to their liking. To do this, they added a revamped character editor that allowed free-form creation of faces. For the first time in the Fallout series, Bethesda decided that the player's character would be fully voiced, a decision that would end up dividing fans. Bethesda's ability to use their updated creation engine allows the game to contain more open approaches to conversations with NPCs. This includes the ability for the camera angles to change throughout dialogue, creating a more cinematic feel to each interaction. Perhaps the biggest change came from the settlement system, in which players are able to create and manage a number of settlements throughout the Commonwealth. Iron Zur also returned as the composer. His inspiration for the soundtrack is very similar to previous games. He has spoken about how it is meant to reflect that despite the despair of war, there is also hope for the future. He wanted to capture this duality with the main theme of the game. Throughout the game, he shaped the music to fit the feelings the player should be feeling in that environment. The game is set in an open-world post-apocalyptic version of Boston and Massachusetts region known as the Commonwealth. The main story takes place in 2287, 10 years after the events of Fallout 3, and 210 years after the bombs were dropped. The player takes control of a character known as the Lone Survivor, who emerges from Vault 111 after being in a long-term cryogenic stasis. After witnessing the murder of their spouse and the kidnapping of their son, the sole survivor ventures out into the Commonwealth in search for their missing child. Along the way, the player will be caught up in a situation that will decide the future of the Commonwealth. Upon its release, Fallout 4 received positive reviews from critics, with the game being praised for its thought-provoking narrative, the large amounts of content, the overall freedom, the score, character and world design, and combat. However, some criticised the visuals of the game and the bugs that were present at launch. There were also criticisms directed towards the RPG elements compared to other Bethesda games, with critics feeling as if it was simplified, meaning that the player had no real effect on many of the quest outcomes. Despite the criticisms, Fallout 4 won a number of Game of the Year awards, including a BAFTA for Best Game and Game of the Year at the DICE Awards. Fallout 4 was a commercial success as well, with 1.2 million copies sold on Steam alone in the first 24 hours, breaking the GTA 5 record for the most concurrent players on a Steam game not developed by Valve. Bethesda shipped 12 million units to retailers within the first 24 hours, grossing $750 million. Fallout 4 is a game that seems to divide gamers, with some believing it is not a true RPG due to its simplified RPG mechanics, but with others believing it is one of the best games to be released by Bethesda. One point that cannot be argued is that Fallout 4 was a critical and commercial success for Bethesda, and helped place Bethesda as one of the most successful video game companies ever. After a couple of years went by, people began to wonder what Bethesda's next game would be. Rumours began to start that they were working on another Fallout game. This excited many fans who hoped that Bethesda could learn from Fallout 4 and create the best Fallout game in the series. However, not long into these rumours starting, people began to hear that this would be no normal Fallout game. It would be a multiplayer Fallout game. In 2018, Bethesda would release Fallout 76.
War never changes. In 1776, this great nation accepted that armed conflict was the only way to preserve our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If our founding fathers could only see us now. From Antietam to Amiens, Okinawa to Anchorage, we have fought. And now, the Red Menace is at our doorstep. Democracy itself is under threat of annihilation. That is why today, July 4th, 2076, 300 years after our great nation began, we gather together to honor the completion of Vault 76. This sprawling underground shelter may have been engineered by Vault Tech, but it was built by you, the good people of America, so that if the bombs do come, if the end does come, our way of life will endure. But not everyone will be saved. Those chosen to enter this vault must be our best and our brightest. For when the fighting is stopped and the fallout has settled, you must rebuild. Not just walls, not just buildings, but hearts and minds, and ultimately, America itself. So as we stand here today, we pray that the world will know peace. But if that is not our destiny, if war must come, we stand together knowing that here in Vault 76, our future begins.
Development of the game was done by Bethesda Games Studios Austin. Todd Howard did not return as director, instead that was taken by Jeff Gardner. This would be Bethesda's first ever multiplayer game, with a map that would be 4 times as big as Fallout 4. The team were able to work on a modified version of the creation engine. This let them create a more detailed map. It also helped the team to create a world that was 16 times more detailed than was ever possible on the previous versions of the creation engine. The team also included localized weather conditions and were able to recreate a more accurate terrain mapping thanks to the modified creation engine. Ion Zur returned to compose the score. Upon its release, Fallout 76 received mixed reviews from critics, with criticisms being directed towards the technical issues, the lack of gameplay purpose, and the lack of human NPCs. Interestingly, there have been a number of allegations that have come out since the release of the game. Allegedly, ZeniMax were accused of severe mismanagement, causing an exodus of senior developers. This meant that Bethesda had to borrow developers from other studios, such as Arcane Studios. Despite the initial criticisms of the game, over the years Bethesda released a number of additional content, including Wastelanders, that finally introduced human NPCs to the game. There are many reviewers today who, after a re-review, have given the game more positive reviews, highlighting that the game has significantly improved since its launch, and those who perhaps were deterred from getting the game should give it a try. Commercially, the game performed below expectations. A week after the game's release, Bethesda dropped the price in North America. This is believed to be due to poor sales. By the end of 2018, the game had sold 1.4 million copies. Todd Howard has revealed that the game has 11 million players in total, which leaves us to conclude that Bethesda most likely did make a profit on the game. Despite Fallout 76 now being a game that millions enjoy, there are also a number of Bethesda fans who believe that Fallout 76 damaged the reputation of Bethesda. For over 15 years, Bethesda have wanted to create a science fiction game, with one example being Todd Howard's desire to create a role-playing Star Trek game in the 2000s. This was rejected. Not long after that, Bethesda began thinking about an original game set in space. After years of development, in 2018, Bethesda announced their first original IP in 25 years, Starfield.
You're part of Constellation now. Part of our family.
We do not fully understand all that is at work here.
No finer group in the stars to be unraveling this mystery.
I'll follow you from here on out, Captain.
Grab jump is ready. I love this part.
These artifacts could be everything we've been looking for. Another great secret the universe is asking us to unravel.
Human settlements throughout the galaxy could be at risk.
We are not stopping. Whatever lies at the end of this road will change humanity forever. This is where we belong.
Development of the game began after the release of Fallout 4 in 2015. Over the years, Bethesda have been writing a fictional narrative of events by the decade that would go all the way up to the game's present day, in order to ask the question, now that man is living among the stars, what does that mean? In 2013, Bethesda acquired the rights to the game's title, Starfield, as Todd Howard felt there could be no other name but that. Todd Howard was appointed as director, which would mark his first directing job since Fallout 4's release in 2015. The team will be using the Creation 2 engine for the first time. This new engine has allowed Bethesda to develop a game world that contains more than 1,000 galaxies, as well as a number of moons and space stations. Bethesda developed the game so the terrain and alien flora and fauna will change depending on the star system the planet is in and the atmosphere itself. Players will also be given the opportunity to create their own spaceship, which they can fill with a crew of their choice. Players will take on the role of the silent protagonist, who is a member of Constellation, an organisation of space explorers. It will be set in 2310. The player will have to deal with the events surrounding the system, in which two large colonies, the United Colonies and the Free Star Collective, are in an uneasy peace after a colony war. Starfield will be released for some players on the 1st of September, however for most players the release date will be on the 6th of September. It is Bethesda's biggest game for a number of years. In a culture where most gaming companies rebrand the same titles year after year, it is exciting to see something new. It's Bethesda's chance to prove to everyone that they are still at the forefront of the RPG world, and can help place them at the forefront of the gaming industry once again.
Welcome to Constellation. We have a lot to talk about. We're all here because we're committed to the biggest question of all. What's out there? These artifacts could be everything we've been looking for. As to what they are, what they're building, You'll be part of solving that puzzle now.
So, you found something?
The new guy found it.
You dug up the artifact, right? That means you saw it. The visions?
The artifact you found appears to be one of many, scattered across the galaxy. If we can find more, we can unlock their secrets.
Beautiful, isn't it? The man who sold me this told me that it spoke to him.
Of course, the Settled Systems is full of groups with other priorities.
That's the Crimson Fleet! Everybody get ready!
The fleet doesn't follow the rules. Agree to work for UCC staff, and together, we take down these cutthroat pirates.
We're not just here to shoot the bad guys. We're peacekeepers. We protect the people of the Free Star Collective.
When you sign up with the Crimson Fleet, no one quits. The only way out is death.
The path ahead may be dangerous, but we are not stopping.
Most Dusties don't even make it this far.
Because whatever lies at the end of this road will change humanity forever.
I just wanted to end this video by giving some of my own opinions on Bethesda games. Now, not everyone will agree with them, and that's fine. We are all entitled to our opinion. I enjoy Bethesda games and always have. With each game having so much to do, I have been able to spend hundreds of hours in the game. One thing is for certain when it comes to Bethesda titles, and that is you certainly get your money's worth. This is very rare in a market where many games are built around esports competitiveness and the ever-growing in-game purchases, instead of creativity and enjoyment. I am for one very excited for the release of Starfield for that exact reason. I am looking forward to playing a new game. I love Elder Scrolls and Fallout, but I want companies to expand and create new IPs. I don't want them to just keep making the same games. When you think of any game series, remember that it had to start somewhere. That shouldn't change now. I am intrigued to get your opinions on Bethesda games. Are you a fan of them? Whether you are or not, I would love to get your opinion. Also, are you excited for Starfield? Let me know. YouTube gives us a chance to discuss what we think. I never want it to become a place of anger, so I welcome anyone's opinion. Thank you for watching the video. If you have any ideas on what you would like to see next, please let me know in the comments section below.